All right, we'll get ready to go ahead and kick things off today for the first of the 2022 year web series. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with both Davids from Betterview. Just want to thank them for taking time out of their day to come and speak with us. This has been a privilege from the RISE Innovation Committee of being able to host a web series and have these two come in and speak with us. I'm Kevin Tompkins. I'll be the mediator today from State Auto Insurance Company. Love being a part of the RISE Innovation Committee. It's been great and great opportunities like this, having a chance to learn and continue to expand information that we are learning in the insurance industry about innovation and Insurtech companies. So wanted to go ahead and kick things off today. We have the pleasure of speaking with David Lyman and also David Tobias from Betterview. With Betterview, I wanted to give a quick brief introduction on their company. Betterview is the property intelligence and risk management platform that is leading the P&C insurance companies, depending to help them identify and mitigate risk. They're also helping them improve operational and inspection efficiency and building a more transparent customer experience throughout the policy lifecycle. The Betterview platform transforms insurance companies from the repair and replace to predict and prevent, improving loss ratios and bolstering safety for the insured. Betterview was founded in 2014 by David Lyman and David Tobias. David Tobias from Betterview's co-founder and COO, was born into the insurance industry, having grown up in the family business performing property inspections. Realizing that the number one most problematic part of any property was the roof, he learned and teamed up with his fellow Bay Area friend, David Lyman, Betterview's co-founder and CEO, to find a solution. David Lyman is a repeated startup founder with a deep background in enterprise software. So again, let's give everybody to join in for a warm welcome to both of the Davids from Betterview and thank them for coming and speaking with us today.
Thank you, Kevin. Our pleasure.
Definitely.
Sure.
So just happy to have you guys here. And just for a quick, house cleaning notes on this, if there's any questions, we'll try to take those from anybody that's joining into the web series at the end of the series. Please feel free to just go ahead and get those noted into either the chat feature or the Q&A. If there's something that's relevant during the time, we'll try to check that periodically and make sure that we're getting those questions answered in a timely fashion. But please try to leave most of those for the end once we have completed everything. So again, thank you again, David. We'll go ahead and just get things kicked off. I'm excited, again, like I said, to be able to sit here and speak with you guys and dig in and learn a little bit more about Betterview. So kind of kicking things off, I guess, to David Tobias, first kind of question I wanted to ask is, can you tell us about your experience with startups and how Betterview got off the ground? And then kind of how have you decided which ideas to kind of pursue and which to kind of abandon along the way?
Yeah, maybe I'll kick us off a couple different things, within that. But as you mentioned, I grew up in the insurance inspection industry. So I was there doing inspections with my dad and kind of, lived and breathed that for a long time, and then ultimately took over that business. And we had many insurers coming to us asking for more and better roof data because, a significant percentage of property claims are roof related. It's this massive, place of spend for any property insurer in the United States. So we were looking for ways to solve that. And so I deployed, we had about 500 inspectors. I deployed camera poles, which are like painter's poles with camera attachments, to a lot of the inspectors. We tried to get them to go up on ladders. So, we'd pay them a little more to try to get them to go up on a ladder. None of these things really gave a comprehensive view of the roof. Either they weren't efficient, the inspectors didn't want to do it, or you wouldn't see the things that you needed to see. So at the time that we were founded, the drone technology was really coming to be. And so we originally actually started with the concept of using drones to image these buildings at first around the risk, right? Like now we've obviously, around the roof, but now we've gone beyond just the roof, right? And the property as a whole. But that was the initial kind of thought process, because I had these insurers saying, I need better roof data. How can you help us do that? You're the boots on the ground in the field. So, drones, David and I linked up at about that time, and I was, toying around with the drone technology in relation to how it could help supplement the inspection. And he was, working, kind of playing with drones and seeing where there might be, some practical application to it. And as you mentioned, we'd known each other ahead of that, and kind of got together and went from there. But that's a high level summary of how the company got started. I think was interesting is we had customers from day one, right? Before we had technology, before we had a business, we had customers because they wanted this, right? They were my insurance company, carrier customers, willing to kind of work with us. And, that was really helpful, right? We were lucky to have that.
Nice. And then just for, people that are watching this and hearing like just some of the property inspections, could you go just a little bit more into that? Is that just property inspections at the time of a loss, or kind of pre-inspection type of inspections that you guys were doing?
Well, back with the drone, it was really only feasible from a cost standpoint and a speed standpoint post bind, as part of the inspection process, essentially. Because, you were still sending a person out to the field to go, deploy the drone. Then the imagery would come back. We eventually built a lot of software to automatically analyze and turn that into a consumable, report for an underwriter. But there was a lot of time and cost to it. So really the drone could only be used either post claim or, post bind, because of those limitations, right? Now, what we do today is completely different. We're used across the whole policy lifecycle, from quote all the way through to claims and cap management. But it's because we can provide, near instantaneous data at this point. That's
awesome. That's awesome to see, just, seeing the growth with it, and, where some of the technology can take us, throughout the years. So thank you for that. Were there key decisions that you guys have made along the way that led Betterview's success? And how did you navigate some of those important moments? And, what made you decide to kind of pivot a little bit more, like you said, from the drones? You kind of mentioned some, probably just of what they asked was, or the timing around how quick to get information, or what limitations there were there. But could you kind of elaborate on some of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it all starts with and ends with identifying a significant need in the market. And quite frankly, I mean, Dave was experiencing it firsthand, having carriers come to him and saying, hey, your inspections aren't giving me enough data on the rooftop. And hey, Dave, it's not just you, it's everyone. None of the other inspectors. Yeah. And it's like, so there was a systemic issue with that. And there was technical limitations as to why that was happening. But we dug deeper than just purely, hey, I need some better roof data, and tried to understand why is that valuable, and how does that, where is that driving value to the carrier, but also to their insureds. And so really understanding that workflow in depth. And then you have to pair with that a viable business model. So you asked why we pivoted. We solved the problem pretty well with in terms of getting that better data. The challenge was that the business model didn't work out because it wasn't any faster than the old way, and it was actually just adding more cost. And so while there were time and place for carriers saying, hey, it's worth that extra money for us to do this, to get this data. And we're willing to take the time in our process. And basically we're running these in parallel with the full building inspections that like Dave's family's company would do for the traditional inspection. But the problem was ultimately we were struggling to really scale that up and do it in a way that would be long-term profitable. And so that's when we realized that was what drove our pivot was ultimately saying, hey, here's the thing of the pivot. The pivot was a change in approach, but it wasn't a change in mission, right? We were still trying to solve for the same problems, because we knew that was an acute need in the market, and that we were making some progress. So we learned a lot in our first attempt, but we ultimately hit this, it was really clear to us. And fortunately we figured out before it was too late, like barely, that, we needed to make a change in our approach. And so that's when we started saying, hey, well, like what's a where can we actually get that scalable speed and cost while still, delivering on the needs of the market? And then quite frankly, like, where are the other areas we can out deliver in ways that we couldn't by using a drone?
But I think, an important point in all this is people often ask us, like, how did you know you should pivot? Like, that must have been hard, right? And the reality is, yes, it was difficult, structurally, and we were, changing, the basis for the company in a lot of ways. But we listened to our customers. Our customers were telling us, we love the data, but it's too expensive and too slow for us because we want to use it at these different parts of the process. So, like, the simple advice is, seems like common sense, but it's listen to your customers. And I think for us, we've really taken the standpoint of fall in love with the problem, not the solution. The solution might change. The problem never changed, right? And so, just because you have a hammer, everything's not a nail. We had a drone, and there's other companies. There's some very large ones that had raised lots of money that are no longer in business in the drone space. And I think it's because they were so dead set on, like, how are we going to apply this technology, but they didn't know what the problem was or how to solve the problem. And that tool didn't necessarily solve the problem in a scalable, cost-effective way. And so I think it's an important lesson.
And maybe to put numbers on all this stuff. So Dave, I mean, we've customers were looking for orders of magnitude and improvement in both cost and speed. And on the speed front, that was impossible. And in the cost front, it was as well. Like, even when we did tens of thousands of property inspections using drone, to give you an idea. So, like, we had a decent amount of scale, running on a daily basis. A bunch of them were going on all over the country. But our gross margin profile was about 11%. So, if we cut the cost in half, we'll lose money on every deal, but we'll make up for it in volume, right? And then not to mention that we were, obviously spending a lot of money on R&D and sales and G&A and so on. So that was our fundamental challenge. Whereas today, like, we being a true SaaS platform, our margin profile is in the mid 80s. So what's great about that is every deal we're able to sell, we're spending a ton on R&D, we're spending a ton on going to market. And so, we bring in outside capital to help fuel that growth and building out that empire over time. But it's a long-term profitable business model.
Nice. And I mean, I love, like, how you said, David, Tobias, where you were mentioning, like, fall in love with that problem and not just the solution. It kind of leads you along the way to kind of pivot, as you mentioned, as needed, or just continue to see, like, hey, what is that issue that people are having, and how do we continue to meet that need, and get better there. So I guess even from there, to elaborate more, you guys did make that pivot, you made that choice, things, panned out for you, like you said, in a good way. So from there, the main focus, like you said, originally was just like information on the roof. Mm-hmm. So that was that original problem. So what were some of the other things that you were constantly hearing from customers of not just the roof, or what other, maybe characteristics that were needed?
I was going to start, like, one of the things so when we started Betterview and we were doing the drone-based inspections, Dave would already have meetings with customers for RSI, for the traditional inspections. And I would go along with him, and we would go and he'd pitch RSI stuff or have discussions around those services. And then we would talk about Betterview. But it was really helpful because I was able to listen into some of the feedback they were getting just, to a traditional inspector. And it was this cost and speed thing. So even on those inspections, forget the drone stuff for a bit, there was all this cost and time pressure. So, ultimately everyone, the big need in the industry also is to get more, higher quality data earlier in the process, all the way to the quote, maybe even to marketing to an extent. But that was one of the things we were hearing.
Yeah. And so, that was a pressure in the market already. I think what we also learned was, so inspections can be good, right? One of the main, parts of the inspection is, validating data, which obviously we can do. Now we can do that, instantaneously. But the other part was identifying issues on the property and issuing recommendations, to fix these issues. And so a big thing for us at Betterview is not just data. We actually developed a software platform where you could not just, get the data, but see why, a roof had a low score, right? Was it ponding? Was it staining on the roof, missing shingles, whatever it might be, and actually drive action out of that. So isn't it a better experience if I can tell you, I'm not gonna insure your building unless you fix this missing shingle on your roof. Here's the image. Here's where it is. Here's the report that goes with that. That's better than just saying I'm not going to issue you a policy or I'm going to cancel. I'm going to non-renew you. Right. That's one example, but it goes on and on. Wildfire, cut back the vegetation around your building, right, to make it, so you have more defensible space. So ultimately, at Betterview, we do provide data into all these different parts of the equation, but we want to help insurers predict and prevent loss rather than just repair and replace it. We actually think we know, because we've seen it in the numbers, like we can actually, make a difference on that and help people prevent losses. But you need a platform that actually can help you do that, right? Interact with the insured, issue those recommendations, see if they got complied with, right? And so our platform can do those things. And really that's kind of unique in the space. I think a lot of other people really focus just on the data. The data is fundamental. You have to have the data. You have to have it quick. It has to be available via an API. But you also need a way to get that data to the insured to actually change behavior. That changes the insurance market, right? Data by itself does not change the insurance market.
Yeah, Kevin, if we tell you that your house, there's a ticking time bomb of, something that's very likely to lead to a loss in the future due to a weather event or a human event, it hadn't happened yet. We really got to show, we got to make that really clear and compelling for you to take action. Just for us to know about it or your insurance carrier is not helpful to the extent where you don't know about it. And even if you know about it, are you looking at it and going, oh, wow, that is a huge problem. I better take care of this and to motivate the action that leads to the loss prevention. So that's an ongoing thing. And it has to, you need the data. That's fundamental, right? But you also need a really effective way as a carrier to share those insights downstream if you hope to actually improve outcomes.
Yeah. And look, our customers do, right? We have a laundry list of customers now, and that's what they care about. They care about actually changing that interaction to a more predict and prevent mindset. But, they need the tools to do that. And you have to remember recommendations, that whole thing that does exist, in the inspection world today, right? The problem is it just doesn't scale. It just doesn't scale to the point that you can actually, make a difference.
Definitely. And I think you even mentioned a piece there, like there's recommendations, or if there are, specific items that you're seeing, that piece that you guys are also able to provide later on is, did those items get taken care of? So there is a lot of times of identifying an issue up front, but did somebody really take care of it, or do they continue to take care of some of those items on a property? For example, if there's, maybe tree overhang that's on a roof, maybe they have gotten it taken care of once, but if you're a long-term customer, is that something that you're seeing that the person is letting it grow back out, and then that could still become an issue again? So being able to easily, detect those type of, like you said, recommendations or hazards, I think that's really cool.
Absolutely, Kevin. Easily is the key, right? I mean, I think the thing, so even back to when we had the drone platform, these recommendations, by the way, are not something we invented. It's a standard part of especially the more comprehensive loss control property inspection reports that RSI, for instance, have done. In addition to kind of looking at everything, they collect a bunch of photos, they answer a bunch of questions, but they have a rec sheet as well. And so, but what becomes the ease piece of it, it's to be able to do that at scale across all property types, including much lower premium standard, single family homes, that gets a lot more complex. And as you're saying, the environment changes, like the world is dynamic. And so that is another key piece of functionality that we've now systematized to be able to automatically determine what are changes that you care about as a carrier, and then monitor and be notified. And so because of the scale they're dealing with, they can't just go in and I'm going to, set a reminder for myself. I'm going to go look through every single property every week or month or whatever it is. But instead, Betterview can take that burden and just send you notifications on the major changes that matter, that you decided in advance. I want to be notified of these things.
Well, and it's changed, in the kind of old way of doing it, right? It would require maybe sending inspectors out every year to do something like that. Well, that's not cost effective. A lot of carriers can't really do that. And then you have to have an underwriter look at all those inspections, right? So, using our software, people are able to set rules or flags to say, like, these are the things I want to know about and change. That's really changed the way that they think about it. Something that they would maybe only look at every 2 years or 4 years. Now they can look at every year, or we have some that are looking multiple times a year because, we're helping them find the needles in the haystack, and we're thinning down that haystack so much that they only have to look at a few, right? And so, it's really about changing the way, some of these processes are done, because there's new software available to do it. There's new data and then software to kind of do some of this, rules engine and things like that I was talking about.
Nice. That's definitely, you guys are doing great things.
Thank you.
All right. What was it like to be part of a 500 startups accelerator, and how do you think it impacted Betterview's success?
It's, I kind of equate it to getting a personal trainer. You can go to the gym and figure it out on your own. And a lot of people do, and that's perfectly fine. Anytime I've engaged a personal trainer in the past, one thing it did, it was insured. I always showed up at the gym. And then you had some additional expertise. You got, it changed your routine. It might change your thinking of how you go through your routines and correct your posture when you don't have it quite right. So I think a startup accelerator is kind of, and by the way, trainers are not free, right? There's a cost to them. So, you parallel that to a startup accelerator, I think it's an appropriate analogy. For us, we gave up some equity in order to first of all, it was kind of a forcing function for us to kind of get together. And this is when we, it caused us to, I'd say, increase our velocity. And then we also started building a team while we were there. So we started adding our first external folks full-time beyond the two of us. So those are some things that I think really, really positive. And then we picked up a few things here and there that we wouldn't have otherwise done. I remember one of them was, we were really big on, hey, you need to build more customer relationships. Like we had good contacts, but it caused us to really up the level on that and doing a lot of prospecting to try to figure out where there's demand in the market, and did some things that, that would have not have been a natural thing for us. And quite frankly, you know what, we're still doing that today as a company, just at a much more sophisticated and larger scale level than we did back then. So I think those are all like a lot of positives. And I think it also put us on, one of Dave was talking about the family business, which is a small business owned by the family. You don't have outside investors, which is great. Like, you have no dilution in your ownership. But if you're going to go and, for instance, overinvest in both technology and then go to market to really scale out, those activities can absorb a lot of capital. So, those are times when you look at it and go, hey, I'm willing to take some dilution in order to, I'm shooting for a bigger outcome than I otherwise would have, or at least it would be a lot faster. And so I'll take some dilution to grow more quickly. And so that's where startup structure really works. And once again, in the accelerator, it put us on a timeline for going in and getting outside capital, and which was successful, which we did raise a nice round, and it kind of, so it was, I think accelerator is an appropriate, term.
Depends where you are, right? And what type of business. I think that's really important, because you have to remember, like, we're using new technology, kind of this new space around geospatial. And the startup accelerator can help you, especially when things aren't, like if you're just making another, B2B, CRM, I don't know, right? Like how much it'll help you as much as if you're kind of a new technology. There was a lot of companies that were doing like pretty novel, like new ideas in there. Some worked and a lot of them didn't. Obviously.
Yeah. And be thoughtful of the fact though, that like, no matter what your outcome, you're going to lose the equity. So you better get something substantial out of it. I think all in all, we're happy where we landed, but I don't think it's like an absolutely like, yes, join whatever accelerator, like be very
a lot of people
skeptical and know why you're getting into it. And the things I mentioned were, I didn't know exactly some of like the for instance, the outbound, marketing expertise and stuff like that was an unknown going in, but there were some other things we knew that it would push us along a certain timeline and path that was compatible with where we were
And
as really, quite frankly, a founding team. You can call it a company, whatever at the time.
much like a personal trainer too, they also force you to do things you might not, want to do, pitch practice, things like that. And I'd say they definitely, they berate you on stage, but you get used to it. Right. And so, I think there's things there that are really helpful, but again, my only word of caution to folks is not for everybody, not for every business. Right.
And certainly it's a timing element too.
Yeah. And it's a timing element. You have to have the freedom to do that because you have to commit, you've got to commit to it. It condenses time, which is nice. Like it's more like a boot camp, right? But you have to be able to commit that time to it. So we got a lot out of it. And, we still keep in touch with a lot of folks from the Accelerator. Again, though, the success rate on a lot of startups is relatively low.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, that's good advice for anybody that's looking at, like you said, there's some key things to look into and determine if it's. So, people that are, into like the Insurtech or thinking about starting a business. There's some key things to have in place, or either know how can this help you along the way, but also like you guys mentioned as well, know that there's some time frames. Do you have that time right now to put towards that and be able to meet those needs? So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's going to accelerate something. So know what you want to accelerate.
Either crashing or or growing. But now there's more specific Insurtech accelerators, right? Like at the time there really wasn't. So that's kind of grown as there's been.
I think even 500 after us have done a fintech specific program, and and that's probably one of the challenges though, is there are so many. I had a pre-existing. I'm a multi-founder. I've done it before. So I had a pre-existing relationship, which is one of the reasons we ended up there specifically. But I think it's you got to figure it out for yourself. But it won't create success for you, but it can accelerate and help you to like do more for a little bit faster what you were already working on.
Yep. All right. No, all good advice. I mean, you guys have mentioned even from where you came out with a certain plan up front, still stuck to your mission, which was to understand what that, problem was and continue there, to even now talking about like the accelerator and just kind of understanding you have to focus on what works for you and, and make those moves at the right times. I know you guys have mentioned in your talks as well, and we see it, across the industry. There is a lot of companies start up and, sometimes they fail. And I mean, I think some of the items that you guys have been speaking to so far, in this webinar is just key items of that, staying true to what that problem is, understanding what your customers are needing. And you have to make those right pivots and moves along the way to stay afloat.
Yeah, there's so many things in this industry, right, that I was lucky that I grew up in it. I saw it. Not everybody has that. And so, I think it's tough, to build true solutions that solve problems for insurers without having some of that experience on your team somehow, right? And, I think it's probably like half of our team has some insurance experience, maybe more, right? And I think it's not to say you can't do it without it, but I think it would be really hard. We're in a heavily regulated industry, that has operated a certain way, for better or worse. It's operated a certain way for a long time. And if you want to, apply and make some of those processes better and change some of them potentially, you really better understand it before you go presenting, solutions to problems to folks.
All good information. Right. We noticed that Betterview's event calendar is very busy in the coming months. So if you guys, don't mind, can you speak to the importance of attending like industry events, to marketing your services?
Yeah, I mean, whenever we attended events, it used to always be just the two of us, but fortunately we have a bigger team now, and we're able to spread out that commitment, or else I think we would never be home. But yeah, I mean, events have just been successful for us over time. And once again, I think, there's different types of events. The ones we found most successful, like the ones that we really focus in on, are ones where our customers or prospective customers are going to be there. And so it's almost always with a focus of business development, with some exceptions, but and quite frankly, it's also, you want to be on the right topic. So there's a ton, you could spend all your time at events, like I was saying, So you got to be selective and thoughtful. And the number we've attended has certainly increased over time as we've had more folks to be able to support all of that.
Yeah.
But all in all, I think it's, it's getting built. The relationship building is important for, I think, a few things. One of them is just for us to hear what customers actually need. We're continuing to evolve, right? We continue to build more stuff. Our product does more things, does it better over time. And that's a piece of it. And the second part is just to understand how you apply that to customer problems and having them understand how they can apply it. And then, and then just foundationally, you want to build trust. And it's just a lot easier to do that when you're, interacting with people in person.
Yeah. And, there's so many events now, Insurtech related events. There didn't used to be, right? Like, this has happened over the last 5 years or so. And so that makes it harder. Like, which ones do you send folks to? Which ones do you heavily invest in? And, I think at the end of the day, it's all helpful. It's also helpful for our customers to hear from their peers. But, we've gotten to a point too, where we're starting to do some of our own events and invite customers and prospects and other folks so that they can talk to each other, right? And share their successes, because there's a ton of value on that. So, I think it's events have been great for us. We'll continue to do them, as you see our calendar there. We just want to make sure we're doing the right ones.
Yeah, the doing your own is always kind of daunting, especially in the early days. You're like, who's going to attend and who's going to show up. We've officially formed a customer advisory council several years ago. It was something we kind of talked about doing. And one of our investors in a previous round, they're a strategic investor. They're an insurance carrier, and they're like, oh yeah, the thing you were talking about, like, I want you to write that in our docs and commit that we're going to be on the customer advisory council. I was like, all right, well, I guess this is in motion now. It was a good forcing function. It's turned out to be incredibly helpful. The quality of the event and what everyone gets out of it is just continue to increase over time. But once again, you sometimes just need that catalyst to get things going, and don't be scared to jump into the deep end a little bit.
Definitely. I'm definitely with the events. I'm sure it kind of helps you guys stay on the brink of the edge of trends and things that are changing as well, or where, some of the information that might be needed or what the insurance industry is looking for. So like being a part of those events, like you said, continuing to talk to peers, talk to your customers, helps keep you, relevant there and learning, like you said, is to also continue to expand your, business.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. One of the things though, you do have to be careful on the trends, right? You got to be kind of true to who you are. It was fun. I mean, we used to joke like, when the drones were a hot space, right? Like that was core to us. But we used to joke like, we need to figure out how to put drones on the blockchain, and we'll just and use AI to do it all. And it's like, it's fine. But like AI, the key is it's all about how you apply this stuff that makes sense to your business.
Does it solve that problem, right?
We've gone heavy in AI, so I joke about it, but it's like that scenario. We have a bunch of folks training computer vision models and risk scoring models. So that's a big component. But
it's a practical application, right? It's better than having humans look at the photos. It's more accurate and consistent. But
blockchain never made any sense for us.
So, I think you have to be careful at some of these conferences because there's a lot of marketing spin and there's a lot of vaporware, quite frankly, right? Like, I remember when we started, and it's just gotten worse. People would come up to us and say, like, run my home, right? Like on our current, product. Because they've been burned by companies that they said they had certain things and they didn't. And we hear this still today a lot. Like we'll have a feature, in our product, and then, a competitor will be like, well, we're building that. It's like, well,
we're dealing with a carrier right now, for instance, too, also they've been burned by several insurtechs, and they're very gun shy right now. And it's a challenge to get over. They're like, well, they've had some bad experience, and it's not just fly by night stuff. It's companies you've heard of, and are like, okay, well, that's a challenge. And unfortunately, like we're having to bear the brunt of that pain. And so it's going to take the actual sales side to get the deal to where, to get them to really bite off in a big, meaningful way on this particular customer is going to take longer because they're going to need to get more comfortable. They're going to need to get us in production, but at a really small level so that we can build bigger. Look, but at the other side, there's other companies that we work with, and they come in and they consume the full thing at this point because we've built that level
And we have
of trust
you know,
and comfort.
and we've proven it out with other large carriers, and we have their logos, and that helps. But part of this, in a startup, is living long enough to make it to that point, right? That's the key. Number one of startups is live.
I definitely have to. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys for that. With it, what advice do you have for someone looking to get involved in the Insurtech space? I know we kind of talked about, different areas and things that are important there, but if we just, elaborate on it a little bit more, and, what do you wish you knew before starting Betterview?
It's a good question. I mean, I think there's a lot of insurtech startups, as I kind of alluded to earlier, that could use. So if there's like insurance professionals on this call, for example, there's a lot of folks that could use more insurance expertise on their team. So I think a great place to start is to look at the insurtechs that are out there, the startups that are out there, and see if there's a fit, right, for your skill set. Because I think that's a great way to get some learning. And especially if you've been at a corporate like your whole career, startup is very, very different, right? Role definition could change weekly, daily sometimes. Even company priorities could change. We were a drone company, now we're not, right? So I think getting some experience in a startup, before you kind of try to go and do one on your own, it could be really helpful, in that. And again, there's so many companies that I know of that are looking to add more, expertise to their team with that insurance background. I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that, but just be prepared. It is not the same as being at a large corporate, right? There is no HR. There is no, the things that certain things that you might be accustomed to are very different. And that can be, like jumping into a cold pool for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, most of the things that I wish I had known, you just have to experience. And I think there's, and Dave's kind of touching on that too, as to why, look, if you build the next Facebook and you're in your dorm room and it just starts taking off like crazy, like, of course you should chase that. But if you're like, well, I'm going to drop out of school in the hopes that I can create something from scratch, because that's just, and it's all going to work out, like, that's a very different thing. So typically the right, like the right path on average, for most people is going to always be get as much experience and learn as much as you can before you go out, because there's so many things you're still going to have to learn. And so the fewer things that you have to learn the hard way, the faster you'll be able to, continue to build. Because here's the thing, as soon as, it's this exponential growth function in a startup. You're doubling, tripling year over year, pretty, or more early on, but, some potentially it's a little more erratic. You're dealing with small numbers, but I'm talking about, like, once you hit $1 million in revenue, you got to get from 1 million to 2 or 3 in the next year. And then you got to get from 2 or 3 to, to 6 or 10 and then from there, you got to go from 10 to 20 and it keeps going on and on. And so it's a ultra marathon. It's not a sprint. And
so you better be prepared for it. And, by kind of doing something in startups ahead of time, you're doing the marathon training a little bit. Yeah. You're not going to solve it to David's point. Like, you're not going to know everything, because you can't.
I mean, one great example is, like, no one is I've never met anyone no matter how smart and good they are at their job or anything else is any good at hiring without having any experience. So, like, you can get the training, and that helps improve things. But until you really go through and have done that quite a bit, it's certainly an experience art more so than it is a learned thing. I think Dave was talking about presentation skills. Some people are naturally better at it than others, but it's a learned skill more so than it is innate talent that people have. Mm-hmm. So I think with that, it's like, also just be really self-aware of what you do and don't know, and own it, and be like, okay, like, I'm not great at this. That's okay. Like, I'm going to find somebody who's great at it. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And you can do that all day long.
But the flip side, there's so many challenges still that aren't solved in this space. Yeah. That there's a ton of opportunity, right? But you could have the greatest tech and the greatest solution, but sales cycles are long, right? Like, you have to look at the practicalities of the space that you're in. So,
but generally, I'd let the problem tug on you instead of like, hey, I think there's the opposite of that. We've seen some people are like, hey, I got this thing. And insurance has a big pot of money. That's a big industry. I'm going to go, if I just need a sliver of that to, be really successful. And I think it's kind of a flawed mentality.
Yeah. And then,
Good luck. I mean,
you need to charge to the value here.
Yeah.
Like, although there's a lot of money being spent in insurance, right? It needs to be spent effectively and profitably. And, they're not just going to spend it just for the sake of it, just to be innovative. It needs to solve a problem.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I guess for you guys, I mean, you've been through, some of the motions of it, like you said, of learning and just continue to solve a problem to make changes when needed. What can you guys tell, just our listeners, some good advice around when you are working with your customers and they're always needing something different? How do you stay true to, the items that you can really focus on and work on versus the other ones that you may want to dabble in, but, it might not be that time or you just don't have the resources to, kind of build on that? How do you kind of maneuver all of that?
Well, I mean, it really starts with understanding why they're asking for it. The question why is really powerful. We need better data around X. Okay, well, why do you need that? What problem are you trying to solve with this? And then how are you gonna utilize that if we give it to you, right? And what you find out a lot of times is maybe it's not as big of a problem as some people might think it'll be, or there's a different way to solve it, or you've already solved it in some other way and you just need to educate the customer on that. The flip side of that is if you start hearing the same thing from different customers and it's like the same kind of problem and it's really similar and you can pattern match, say, you know what, this is an unsolved problem across the industry. Because sometimes there's problems that are just problems within a company or even a line of business within that company, but not broad-based. So we could spend Betterview could spend $5 million creating more product around that one problem, and then only be able to sell it to one customer. Right. And so that's what you really want to avoid. But, it starts with just listening to folks, listening a lot, and then asking them a lot. Right. Because again, many times, we've had stuff presented to us. If you gave us this to prevent these, this bad claim we had, and we're like, well, how many of those types of claims do you have every year? What does that cost you? Well, you're a top 5 carrier. That's a sliver of your thing. Solving this, how much would you pay me for that? Solving this one little thing for it. Well, not that much. And so, and so you have to weigh these things and have that kind of dialogue with the customer.
Yeah. In addition to that, sometimes it's interesting too, when we get diverging feedback, we'll hear one thing and hear something completely opposite, maybe from somebody else in the same realm, but there's a lot of interest around it. And that you once again need to step back and say, okay, given all of this, how do we need to really solve that problem? That was an example of why we built our flagging system, where our customers anyone can flag a property, but they get to choose exactly how they want to do it. And they pick the data points and what quantities. It's totally configurable, because we were hearing, a great example was we identify both where structures are and where vegetation is. And certain carriers really want people to make sure that you don't have trees, overhanging a rooftop. Well, one carrier, we had that in there, and one carrier was like, wait, you're flagging this as a problem. Well, one of our customers is Pebble Beach. And if we go tell Pebble Beach to start cutting their trees back, they're going to tell us to take a hike. So it always kind of depends on who you're talking to and what the context actually need.
The context is key, right?
Yeah.
In any of these things.
But another thing I think is really helpful, Kevin, is so Kanban is something, I have an engineering background, a lot of software development, and I learned I was after a previous acquisition, I was in a much bigger organization, and somebody I worked with was they were pushing Kanban really hard. And so I learned, and one of the key things there that I think is most important is this idea of work in progress. So, what ends up happening is there's a million great ideas, but you should only work on a few things as much as you can manage at any given time, so that you get that really small subset of things done, and then you pull the next few things in. So it's all about, because otherwise you work on, 5 things, or do you work on 50? If you work on 5 things and you get those done in 2 months versus trying to tackle all 50 simultaneously, it's going to take you 2 years or more.
Definitely. That's good advice. I know you guys have also mentioned, that you move more in the space of AI. That's one of the big, kind of topics everywhere, just like how it was with drones. So where do you guys see some of that in the future, of just where AI can take us, or the continuous development and betterment of the AI process?
Well, we use, computer vision, machine learning to look at aerial images, right? And process that very quickly, a high degree of accuracy to tell, conditional and, property characteristics. So conditional elements, what are the conditions of roofs, properties, so on. And then, what do we see out there? Is there a pool? Is there a garage? And so on and so on. So, the reason we do it is that's a lot more efficient than having a human, look at millions and millions of images. And humans are, they have a subjective approach to it. What I might think is bad, you might not, or you might miss, and right. And so the computers can be consistent in that. So to scale and hit the, speed and cost and the different vectors that we need to hit, AI is really helpful for that, for this type of repetitive, repeated task. The thing we look at is, that is not an efficient use of, say, an underwriter's time to go look at, overhead images and try to determine, the condition of a roof, for example. It's just not, right. And underwriters, even with the best guidelines, can still be inconsistent, not because they're bad. It's just, that's not their day job. They're not roofers, right. And so, I think applying this type of technology, specifically, AI, as we speak about it, it's like, against what problem? It is not, you don't want to get caught in that hammer and nail thing where like, I just want to use AI on something. Is it the right tool for the job? For this aerial imagery analysis, it really is, but it might not be for everything. And it's complicated. We have a lot of PhDs, at our company working at this. It's hard to replicate. It took us years to get the level of accuracy and speed that we're at now. And for us, that's a competitive moat, right? We think our quality and speed and the other vectors are better than anybody else's, and we think it's hard for people to catch up.
Nice. All right, we have almost about 10 minutes left, so I wanted to check and see if there's any questions that came in from the listeners, and we do have one in here. So where do you see the greatest opportunity for Betterview to collaborate with established carriers, brokers, and TPAs?
I think the short answer is like we work with all of them, right? And I think there's still, the carriers really set the tone, for a lot of this. And they've also invested a lot of the money in different folks in the space, right? I think it just goes to show you like how big of a problem the carriers see this as, that they've invested millions and millions into our space specifically, and then Insurtech more broadly, right? And so for us, we've really seen the carriers kind of lead the charge. And then, there's different tiers of carriers, right? And, all of them are really innovating in a lot of ways. You also see things like AM Best now rating on innovation, right? As one of the rating factors for your sustainability, right? Your long-term sustainability as an insurer. So we think there's a lot of opportunity with the brokers, both captive and independent agencies, and TPAs, especially as we're doing more and more around CAT response, claims management, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to that, like Dave said, our foundational principle of greater transparency and helping, not just telling you there's a problem, but showing you and really explaining it as much, and getting everyone to understand, the nature of it, the impact, the potential impact down the line. And so, yeah, we see as we continue to add more functionality, we think more and more about how do we drive that transparency more successfully and more thoroughly across the board.
And any stakeholder, right? Mm-hmm. Again, on that, like whether it be the broker, TPA, any stakeholder, like we want to be part of that. We can provide value by being part of it.
Definitely. I think this is a good follow-up question that came in to kind of elaborate a little bit more on some of those areas. So you said there are many challenges in this space that haven't been solved. Are there any that have your attention right now? Any specific ones?
I mean, for us specifically, the industry is just now really kind of seeing that you can do this predict and prevent in a more global scale, right? Like you not just with inspections and whatever. So I think there's, for us, very specific, to what we do. It's not solved yet in that, it's just starting, right? Where you can do this at scale. And, many carriers that like your home might be with are buying, our platform today, but they might not be sharing that with you. Right. And so for us, that just seems like a big opportunity. Consumers expect more of their brands now, and still in the insurance world, a lot of people pay their premium, and as if they don't have a claim, they might not hear from their insurer until the renewal comes up. Right. So let's say somebody's a Betterview customer and they happen to be insuring your home. Why not share quarterly or twice a year, whatever it might be? Hey, here's it looks like your roof is in great shape, or it's degrading. It's something you should keep an eye on, or, X, Y, and Z. Like, be proactive. And I think that's a big opportunity. I think it's good for the insurer. It also will prevent claims, which is good for, both the insured and the insurer. And gives a chance, because we think a lot about customer experience, right? How do insurers, agents, TPAs, how all of these people improve their customer experience? And we think by being proactive, right, that's a better customer experience. I would love my insurer to be giving me updates on things going on in my home that might be difficult. Like, I don't want to go up on my roof, so I'm not looking every day, but they are using tools like Betterview to do so. Sharing that down seems like an unsolved problem so far that we're aiming to solve.
Yeah, we would love to change the contract, like the paradigm in insurance, where carriers right now, their primary responsibility is, hey, Dave, your home gets destroyed. We want to be there for you, get you a check, get you back on your feet as soon as humanly possible. That's wonderful. And the industry needs to continue to drive towards that. But, imagine a future where carriers looking and go, hey, our first line responsibility is actually to help you avoid that situation in the first place. And we're taking some ownership in that. We're really serious about helping, driving those better outcomes so that you're not, and look, it's mutually beneficial. Dave's house isn't, burnt down and or whatever it is. And the carrier's not writing out the check to replace the whole thing. So, it's trying to find that mutually beneficial outcome that leads everyone to a better place. But carriers need to, like, first of all, think about, our tool only goes so far, right? It's just a tool. The carriers have to own that as this is how we want to interact with our insureds and with our agents as well.
But we're seeing a shift in that, right? We're seeing at least the most innovative insurers out there want to do that, right? They want to, they understand it. It sounds silly when you say it out loud, but of course they want to help prevent the loss. So, okay, if that's the understanding, and of course they want to do that, how, right? And they need tools like Betterview to do it. So, that's an exciting space.
All right. Just being cognizant of the time, we don't have any other questions coming in. We got probably about 5 minutes left. So I just wanted to kind of at least take the opportunity to thank both of you for, coming in and speaking with us, sharing just, your experiences, your knowledge that you have. I think it's very beneficial for a lot of people. Like I said, we have people on the call that are in the insurance industry. So just hearing about your company, if they're not aware of it, I think you definitely have, at least giving some information that will spark, the minds, within their companies, and look for opportunities to actually continue to be innovative and use these type of tools that are out there in different ways. So again, just thank you guys for taking time out to speak with us and be a part of our first web series for 2022 for our Innovative Rise Committee. So thank you a lot.
Thanks for having us. And, hopefully we made it interesting enough that people will come to your second one. So
definitely. We have 5 minutes. There was actually one more question that popped in. So how do you demonstrate savings related to prevention? Do you foresee any future challenges demonstrating value in that space?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're lucky enough to be, we've been at this for some time now, right? So we have customers that have their loss experience, before Betterview, after Betterview, right? And so our own customers have done that and given us that data back, and a lot of them have let us, use that in white papers and other things. But we also, look at historical losses that the carrier had, so we can use our tool back in time, and we can say, if you would have been using Betterview, right, and you knew about this poor roof, for example, you could have avoided this loss, and you can actually really put dollars to it in that way. But, I think we had one carrier who had a 31% improvement in loss ratio after starting with Betterview, and they track, and we help them do this, track the actions that they take with the Betterview platform. And, what did they do? Change premium. The interesting thing with that particular carrier is one of the biggest categories of things they did with our platform was issue and then track recommendations. And that helped improve their loss ratio in fairly short order, right? So we've been able to quantify the savings in a lot of different ways. And, I think that was more of a challenge when we first started because we just didn't have, customers. And so we do that now, and it's a pretty practical and easy approach to show somebody the raw numbers. Like, this is what life looks like, with Betterview, and here's what it looks like without Betterview. And it looks horrible without Betterview. So.
Definitely. Well, thank you guys again. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and just passing along the knowledge. Like I said, there's a lot of people out there, that's interested in startups, interested in the Insurtech. So you guys have shined a lot of light on that, and we appreciate you for that.
No, thanks for having us.
pleasure.
And if somebody on the call or the recording has questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us. We're happy to answer it. So thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you.
Awesome.
All right. Take care.
You too.